Welcome back to the deep dive. I was looking at a stat this morning that actually made my head spin a little bit. It said the average person today consumes about 34 gigabytes of information every single day.
34 gigabytes.
Yeah, which is the equivalent of reading about 100,000 words
Yeah.
every single day.
Wow. That sounds exhausting just hearing you say it out loud. I mean, it explains why we all feel so totally burned out by 5 p.m., right?
Right. We're absolutely drowning in data. We have more facts, more opinions, just more content at our fingertips than any generation in human history. But here is the nagging question that I think a lot of us feel, especially when you put your phone down at night. Does it feel like we are any wiser?
Oh, man, that is the question of the age. We have high-speed access to knowledge, sure. We can look up the capital of any country or the molecular weight of hydrogen in seconds, but wisdom,
Yeah, real wisdom.
actual navigational wisdom for how to live a meaningful life, that feels scarcer than ever.
It feels incredibly scarce. It feels like we are data rich, but, wisdom poor. And that is exactly why I am so excited about the stack of sources we are diving into today.
It is a phenomenal stack.
It is. We are doing a scriptural deep dive that spans the Old and New Testaments. We are talking wisdom literature like Job and Proverbs, the Psalms, the Law and Deuteronomy, and then jumping all the way to the New Testament letters of 1 Corinthians and James.
It is a heavy stack, but it is a really necessary one.
And the mission today, the topic is specifically true wisdom versus worldly wisdom.
And what I love about this particular study is that it forces us to define our terms immediately, because we assume we know what wisdom means.
Right, like being a Jeopardy champion or something.
Exactly. Usually in our modern context, we think it is being smart, having a high IQ, collecting degrees, or maybe just being old and experienced. But the mission of this deep dive is to strip all of that away and see how the Bible defines wisdom and how that definition clashes violently, sometimes with how the world defines it.
It is not just a dictionary difference, though, is it? It is a source difference.
Precisely. The texts we are looking at don't present this as a gradient. Like, worldly wisdom is okay, but God's wisdom is the premium version you pay extra for.
The upgrade.
Right, the in-app purchase. No, it presents them as two completely different operating systems. They are incompatible. You cannot run both at the same time without crashing the computer.
Two different operating systems. I like that image. So if we want to install the correct one, the true wisdom system, we have to find the installer. We have to find the start button. And that is where the source material begins, with a massive question. Where does wisdom actually start?
It is the origin story of wisdom. If you or I wanted to get smart on a topic today, say astrophysics or coding, we know the drill. You buy the book, you take the master class, you watch the YouTube tutorial.
Sure.
But the Bible says that for wisdom, capital W wisdom, the starting line isn't a classroom or a Google search.
The sources point us to what they call anchor passages. Specifically, we are looking at the book of Job. Now, for you listening who might not be super familiar, Job isn't a textbook. It is a story of a man who lost absolutely everything.
Everything.
His wealth, his children, his health. He is sitting in the ashes, scraping his sores, just trying to make sense of the universe.
In context is everything here. Job isn't writing from an ivory tower. He is writing from the absolute bottom of human experience. He has looked everywhere for answers. And in chapter 28, verse 28, he gives us a specific coordinate. He says, "Behold, the fear of the Lord, that is wisdom."
That is wisdom. It doesn't say it leads to it. It says it is it. And then you have Proverbs 9, verse 10, backing it up with one of the most famous lines in Scripture. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom.
That word beginning is crucial. In the Hebrew, it implies the first step or the principal part. It implies that if you don't have the specific component, you haven't even entered the race. You might be running fast, you might be incredibly intelligent, but you aren't on the track.
Okay, but we have to pause here and really unpack this phrase, the fear of the Lord. Because honestly, that is a huge barrier for a lot of people.
Oh, absolutely.
It sounds archaic. It sounds like we were supposed to be cowering in a corner, afraid of being struck by lightning. Is the text saying that being terrified is the prerequisite for being wise?
I am really glad you pushed on that because it is the most common misconception. When the wisdom literature, Job, Psalms, Proverbs speaks of fear, it isn't talking about the phobia you feel when you see a spider or a guy in an alley with a knife.
Right.
It is talking about orientation.
Orientation. What do you mean by that?
Think about standing at the edge of the Grand Canyon or looking up at a massive storm front rolling over the ocean. You feel small. You feel a sense of trembling awe. You recognize that that thing is huge and you are tiny.
Yeah, that perspective shift.
Exactly. That is the biblical fear of the Lord. It is a reality check on your size relative to God.
So it is less about terror and much more about humility.
Humility is the perfect word. It is the death of the ego. Think about the logic here. You cannot receive wisdom from a source you think you are superior to. If you walk into a lecture hall thinking you are smarter than the professor, you learn nothing. You just critique.
Because your cup is already full.
Yes. The fear of the Lord is the posture of emptying the cup, saying, you are the creator, I am the creature.
That is a heavy concept for the modern mind, though. We are taught to manifest our own truth, to trust our gut, to be the captain of our own soul. This is saying the exact opposite. It's saying you aren't the center.
And that is exactly why it is the beginning. Until you admit you aren't the source of truth, you can't receive truth. If you treat God as a peer or as a concept you can take or leave, you are building your worldview on a foundation that the Bible doesn't recognize as valid. You might have data, you might have facts, but you do not have wisdom.
So step one is the posture, the fear of the Lord. Let's assume we are there. We are humble. We are ready to listen. The next logical question, and the source material moves right into this, is where does the content come from? If I am ready to receive, what is the signal I am tuning into?
This is where the imagery gets fascinatingly specific. We move from the start to the source, and the Bible uses a very visceral metaphor here. It doesn't say wisdom comes from God's mind.
Right, I'm looking at the notes here on Job 12, verse 13, which says, wisdom and understanding are with him. But then Proverbs 2, verse 6 gets even more granular. It says, for the Lord gives wisdom, from his mouth come knowledge and understanding.
From his mouth, that is heavy source language.
Why the mouth, though? Why not from his spirit or from the energy of the universe?
Because mouth implies speech. It implies words. It implies specific, concrete revelation. If something comes from a mouth, it must be spoken and it must be heard.
It's an active transmission.
Correct. This counters the idea that wisdom is something that just bubbles up from your subconscious if you meditate long enough. The text is saying wisdom is external to you. It is something revealed by God to you.
It is a transmission, not an intuition.
That is a great way to put it. And that connects directly to the mechanism of how we get it. If it comes from his mouth, where do we find those words today? Because we don't usually hear an audible voice booming from the clouds.
Well, the notes point us directly to Psalm 119, verse 104. It says, through your precepts I get understanding.
Precepts. That is a word we don't use often today.
No, not at all.
It refers to instructions, statutes, written rules, the commandments, the scripture itself.
So there is a direct cause and effect relationship here.
Absolutely. Look at the sentence structure in the psalm. Through your precepts, that is the cause. I get understanding. That is the effect. You cannot bypass the instruction and expect to get the understanding.
That is, well, that actually feels kind of restrictive, doesn't it? I think a lot of people like the idea of spiritual wisdom, feeling connected to the divine in a vague, warm way. But this is saying, no, go read the instructions, go read the text.
It is restrictive, but in the exact same way a map is restrictive. If you want to get to a specific destination, you can't just drive based on how you feel or which way the wind is blowing. You have to follow the turns. The precepts are the turns. The text is arguing that true understanding is inextricably tied to the specific words that came from his mouth.
It is like trying to learn physics without ever opening the textbook.
Yeah.
You might have some cool theories about gravity, you might enjoy watching things fall, but you don't actually have understanding until you engage with the laws.
That is a perfect analogy. And this is where we have to be really honest with ourselves. If you say you want wisdom, if you want to navigate your marriage, your finances, your anxiety with God's help, but you aren't engaging with the precepts, with the actual Bible, then according to Psalm 119, you aren't getting understanding. You are just guessing.
And that guessing game leads us perfectly into the next segment of our deep dive. Because if we aren't using his precepts, we are naturally using something else. We default to our own operating system.
And this is the pivot point of the whole study.
Yep.
We have established the source God's mouth. Now we have to look at the alternative, because we all have a default setting, and it is usually set to me.
Trust your gut, follow your heart, speak your truth.
Exactly. And the sources give us a verse that is maybe so famous we miss the punch of it. Proverbs 3, verse 5. Lean not on your own understanding.
Lean not. I want to visualize that.
Yeah.
If I am leaning on something, I am putting my full weight on it. I am trusting it to hold me up.
And the text is explicitly warning, do not put your weight on your own internal logic. Do not build your house on the foundation of what you think is right.
Why not, though? Is it because we are stupid? I mean, humans are pretty incredible. We have split the atom, we have gone to the moon, we have cured diseases. Our understanding is pretty impressive.
It is extremely capable, yes. But in the context of wisdom, and remember, we are talking about navigational wisdom for life, morality, purpose. Our understanding is limited and it is heavily biased. It is a broken crutch. If you put your full weight on it, eventually it snaps.
But the study takes this even further. It is not just that our understanding is weak or fragile. When we jump to the New Testament, the language gets incredibly stark. It shifts from, don't lean on this, to, this is actually offensive to God.
Yeah, this is where the gloves come off. We are looking at First Corinthians now, and you have to understand the historical weight here. Paul is writing to the church in Corinth, which was a Greek city. The Greeks were obsessed with philosophy, with rhetoric, with Sophia, their word for wisdom. They loved a good debate.
So they were the intellectuals of their day.
They were the cultural elite. And Paul drops a bomb in First Corinthians 3, verse 19. He says, the wisdom of this world is foolishness with God.
Foolishness, not second best, not a decent attempt. Foolishness.
And he doubles down in chapter 1, verse 20 to ask, has not God made foolish the wisdom of this world?
So help us navigate this, because this is where it gets tricky for a lot of people. We have listeners who are scientists, doctors, engineers. Is the Bible saying that their education is garbage? That knowing how to perform heart surgery or build a bridge is foolishness?
No, and that is a vital distinction to make. The Bible isn't talking about technical knowledge or craftsmanship. In fact, elsewhere in Scripture, God praises skill and craftsmanship. Here, Paul is talking about worldly wisdom as a worldview.
Okay, a worldview.
Right. He is talking about the attempt to answer the big questions. Who are we? Why are we here? How should we live? What is good and evil apart from God?
It is the autonomy that makes it foolish.
Exactly. You can be a brilliant scientist, but if you think you can solve the human condition, our greed, our hate, our suffering without the Creator, God looks at that and calls it foolishness. It is like a child trying to fly a 747. They might be a very smart child, they might know a lot about video games, but in the context of flying that plane, they are dangerously out of their depth.
It really levels the playing field, doesn't it? It means the person with the PhD and the person who dropped out of high school are in the exact same boat when it comes to spiritual wisdom.
It completely flattens the hierarchy. You don't need a degree to be wise in God's eyes, and having a degree doesn't guarantee you aren't a fool. It all comes back to that starting line we talked about, the fear of the Lord.
This is the contrast language the source notes highlight. You have wisdom from his mouth on one side and wisdom of this world on the other, and they are fighting for control of our lives.
They really are. Every decision we make, how we date, how we spend our money, how we forgive or don't forgive, is a vote for one of these two wisdoms.
And this leads to the practical application. Because up to this point, this all sounds very theoretical. Fear God, don't trust yourself. Okay, fine. But what does that actually look like? If I walked past a wise person and a worldly wise person on the street, or if I worked with them, could I tell the difference?
The source material says yes, absolutely. There is an evidence pattern. Wisdom leaves a footprint.
Let's look at the Old Testament evidence first. This is fascinating to me because it is about public perception. Deuteronomy 4, verse 6. Moses is talking to the people of Israel right before they enter the promised land, telling them to keep God's statutes. And he says, if they do, for this is your wisdom and your understanding in the sight of the nations.
In the sight of the nations. That means it is visible. It is a billboard.
So when you live by these precepts we talk about, it creates a life or a society that actually functions better.
That is the clear implication. The surrounding nations who are operating on worldly wisdom, which usually means power, greed, survival of the fittest, they look at this group of people following God's laws and say, wow, look at how they treat their poor, look at their families, look at their justice system. There is a wisdom there that we simply do not have.
So true wisdom isn't hidden esoteric knowledge. It is not a secret handshake. It is deeply practical. It works.
It works in the real world. And then look at the New Testament parallel. This is one of my favorite definitions of wisdom because it is so counterintuitive to our modern culture. James chapter 3, verse 13.
Let me read it. Who is wise and understanding among you? Let him show by good conduct that his works are done in the meekness of wisdom.
Did you catch the pairing there? Meekness and wisdom.
That feels like a total oxymoron today.
Yeah.
Usually when we think of the smartest guy in the room, we think of the guy dominating the conversation, the guy correcting everyone, the guy who has to win the debate on Twitter.
Exactly. Worldly wisdom is often loud, it is arrogant. It says, look at my degrees, listen to my arguments, I am right and you are wrong. But James says, no. If you are arguing, if you are bitter, if you are self-seeking, that is earthly wisdom. In fact, James goes further and calls that kind of wisdom sensual and devilish.
Wow. Sensual and devilish.
But true wisdom, wisdom from above, is demonstrated by meekness.
Let him show by good conduct. It is behavioral.
It is entirely behavioral. You can memorize the entire Bible, you can win every theological debate, but if you are a jerk, James would say you lack wisdom. If you are arrogant, you have missed the fear of the Lord, which is humility.
That connects the whole circle, doesn't it?
It does. If you start with arrogance, I don't need God, I can figure this out, you end up with the foolishness of the world, which just breeds pride and strife. But if you start with the fear of the Lord, that humility, that all we talked about, you receive his precepts. And the output is a life of meekness and good conduct.
That is a powerful diagnostic tool.
Right.
We tend to judge wisdom by how much someone knows. The Bible judges wisdom by how someone lives.
And specifically, how they treat others. Are they peaceable? Are they gentle? That is the proof of the source.
So let's try to synthesize this entire stack. We have covered a lot of ground today, from the ancient poetry of Job to the practical letters of James. If we were to draw a map of this deep dive, what does it look like?
I would say the pattern map has 4 clear stops. First, the start. It all begins with the fear of the Lord. That posture of awe and humility. You have to get small before you can get wise.
Stop 2.
The source. Wisdom isn't internal. It comes from his mouth. We access it through his precepts, the scriptures. We have to read the book.
Then we hit the conflict.
Right. The warning. Do not lean on your own understanding. Recognize that the world's way of navigating life is often foolishness to God. It is a broken crutch that won't hold you up.
And finally, the proof.
The proof. True wisdom isn't just winning a debate. It is proven by good conduct and meekness. It looks like a life well lived, a life that makes people say, I want what they have.
That is a very clear path. But I have to admit, it is a challenging one. It forces us to examine where we are getting our input. It forces us to put down the phone, put away the 34 gigabytes of daily data, and pick up the text.
It forces us to ask, are we building our lives on the foolishness of the world or the precepts of the Creator? Because those are the only 2 options. There isn't a third way.
And that brings us to the final thought I want to leave with you, the listener. We have talked about how God views worldly wisdom, the strategies that everyone else seems to use, as foolishness. So here is the provocative question to mull over this week. Which area of your life are you currently managing with foolish strategies? Maybe it is your finances, your marriage, your career path. Where are you leaning on your own understanding or popular opinion instead of seeking instruction from his mouth?
That is the question. Where is the broken crutch in your life? And are you brave enough to trade it in for the real thing?
Exactly. Now, we know these are big concepts. We have just scratched the surface of these verses today. We have given you the flyover. But the gold is really in the digging. If you want to truly understand these concepts, do not stop here. We have linked the full source list and additional resources in the description. So go check them out. Dig into the source material yourself.
Through his precepts, remember, go to the source.
That is right. And just a reminder, every week we deep dive into the questions you have about the Bible. We take these ancient texts and see how they apply right here, right now, to give you hope and understanding in your everyday life. It is a journey you don't want to miss. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you on the next deep dive.